Do you think everyone needs to do something like that?
Well, I mean, here we are sort of in the nominal psychedelic renaissance. Like after Stealing Fire, after Michael Pollan's book, there's been this massive, I mean, those books didn't create it. They were simply naming a thing that was already happening and maybe extending the awareness of it and helped crystallize it. But I think that we are in a goofy spot because at the same time that we have more access to more psychotechnologies than any humans ever, they've also been completely ripped out of cultural context. So in all of human history, these things were closely guarded, tightly held secrets, usually passed down through a lineage with very high standards of vetting of who had access to what, when, and why. And now it's gloves off, and you can pretty much one click on Amazon and blow yourself to the moon. And so my sense is that we absolutely need to start articulating cultural parameters for what is appropriate and best use. And it is goofy because particularly psychedelics, but any of these peak state experiences, you could say, deliberate and conscious sexuality is another one. And to your point about has everybody had these experiences, Jenny Wade is a researcher on sexuality and found that over 15 million Americans have had accidental, spontaneous, transcendent experiences during sexuality. So that's not doing some specific protocol, that's not learning tantra or anything like that, just making love with a partner and having some wild, non-ordinary experience. And less than half have actually shared it with their partners. Right. So you're like, because they don't know what to say or do.
Right.
So you're like, both intriguing, inspiring, and tragic, depending on which side you're looking at. Yeah. And so with these elements, and there's the whole, we got the psychedelic renaissance on one side, you've got kind of open sexuality, polyamory, open relating, sex at dawn, that whole kind of movement.
Yeah.
And there are no governors on what we're doing. So to bring it back into cultural guidelines as to how might we or ought we do this, my sense is that, just from an anthropological point of view, you could make a case that, there's a bell curve distribution. And you could say probably, hey, I mean, these are rough numbers, but roughly 10% of people should never touch psychedelics or even any sort of overheating, deliberately ecstatic technologies. Breathwork, sexuality, sensory deprivation, those things. They have a genetic or hereditary history of mental conditions. They have a deliberate and destabilized series of traumas that are maybe not amenable to healing. They might have cluster B personality, so sociopathy, psychopathy, narcissism, those kind of things. That will make those folks worse. So 10%, take it off the table. Only 10% on the far side should ever do them more than a handful of times in their life. And the middle of the bell curve, the 80%, could arguably, what if, for instance, we had a rite of passage in adolescence? Everybody says rites of passage are essential. We have these extended adolescents, they're stretching into the mid-20s. Some people still haven't grown up by the time they're 30. There are still dudes with their Xboxes, smoking weed and jerking off to porn and playing first-person shooters.
At home,
right? At 30. And there's an entire generation of young women that are like, what the hell? I've got a man-child as a boyfriend. When will they ever grow the hell up? So definitive rites of passage feels like a really important thing. And you could say, how about, let's say, 3 grams of psilocybin. It's like that old book, Alex Haley's book, like Roots. Where in the beginning, in West Africa, his father, he's born and his father holds him up, and to the night sky, and he says, "Behold, Kunta Kinte, the only thing in the universe greater than you." Like we need that experience, So that could be a rite of passage, and then marriage. What if, whether it's your wedding night or some precursor to it, you had structured and supported MDMA couples intimacy. Here's my deepest love. Here's my deepest vulnerability. Here's my heart truth. Can I say it and testify with you? And can we forge that bond at that structurally foundational level of our relating? And then potentially end-of-life preparation. And Johns Hopkins has done tons of studies with cancer patients and survivors, but what about a structured 5-MeO DMT experience, which many people who experience it report as a death, rebirth experience of basically the light of source consciousness. Neat. It's a test drive, right?
Have you tried that?
I haven't not tried it.
Okay, gotcha.
So that sense of, preparation for the arguably most important transition this side of birth, you imagine just those 3 experiences. And the thing there is to say, these days, because it's so easy and because it's so accessible and because there's no cultural wrapper or guidelines, people just keep going back to the wishing well. So they'll have a life-changing experience. I mean, I remember going to a live show and one of our buddies was like, oh yeah, I saw Jesus. Second set, man, totally. And I'm like, well, if you saw fucking Jesus, like, why aren't you like going home, starting a ministry, doing something, God knows what. But instead, he was just gonna hang out, go to the show the next night, do it all over again. And so that sense of like, if you only have 3, right, you're gonna suck the marrow out of the significance, the implications, and the applications. So like Lakota warriors, right, they would do their vision quest. They'd go to the mountain, they'd put a circle of stones, they'd stay there for 4 days, they would wait for a dream vision from Great Spirit, and then that would become the lodestone for their life. They didn't come back the next weekend and the weekend after that and the year after that. They said, This was my one, amen. I stick that in my virtual medicine pouch, right? And I cherish it. And I spend the rest of my life waiting for the good day to die.